Hello, students. This is Fazan Mirza. We are discussing threats to biodiversity, a component in conservation that must be addressed in order to devise a strategy to ensure that we conserve the environment where we live. Threats to biodiversity include various human activities, which can be summed up by this acronym HIPPO, where H stands for this habitat loss, and I stands for invasive species, P stands for pollution, the other P stands for population, and O for overexploitation. So these basically five, you can say, aspects. They cover the various activities which are carried on by human beings, which lead to the organisms or various species undergoing extinct because initially they become endangered and then they go extinct. So with that, the biodiversity suffers and the variation in the life form gets reduced, and the ecosystem they start to just get imbalanced. So the activities that we have to discuss are that habitat loss and habitat and degradation of environment, completely human driven, climate change, hurricanes, flooding, again, flooding primarily human driven, excessive use of fertilizer for to increase the yield in the crops, and the industrial and domestic effluents and the pollutions and overexploitation of unsustainable resources, the effects of alien species which eventually become invasive. So all these activities are a threat to biodiversity. They are constantly causing habitat loss for various organisms by deforestation and overgrazing. Habitat fragmentation is occurring as well, and deforestation. So these things have actually caused the organisms to suffer a lot, and many species that probably were never screened for their potential for supporting other life forms, they actually have gone extinct because we expect some 100 million species to be there around us, and only 1.75 million have been screened so far, and these are all the organisms that we know about. So these photographs here, this is kelp forest. Is in Pacific coast of California. This is Pacific sea otter. It also is present in the same region where the kelp forests are growing in the Pacific coast. And this is you can say a savanna, a national park in Kenya, where you can see this African bush elephants is moving. You can't see tall trees here. So actually we have to discuss these things and how they are involved in various how various human activities actually affected these things. And there's an important concept of a keystone species that we'll be coming to. So the kelp forests are underwater forests. These are submerged forests. These are very tall plants, and they are submerged and they are rooted here, and they grow tall by using these stipes. Stipes are these stems. They get erect, and they ensure that these plants, they go so high in the river, or sorry, in the ocean, so that they can access sunlight very well. So, what are we here to discuss? We are discussing a case study of sea otter. So, when we discuss the case study of sea otter, what do we see? We see that sea otter, Pacific sea otter, is a predator of sea urchins, and sea urchins they feed on the kelp forest. So initially, so this kind of food chain, you can see the Pacific sea otter is consuming sea urchins, and the sea urchins are consuming the kelp forest. So kelp forests are the producers. So these are the herbivores, and these are the carnivores. You can say the ones who are consuming these, the predators of the sea urchins. So Pacific sea otters have a very thick fur. So in 19th century they were hunted for fur, and their number in the sea started to decrease. The number of sea urchins increased as the selection pressure, which was predation, was not working, and sea urchins ate through the stipes of the stems of the kelp forest, and the kelp forest started to collapse. So removal of Pacific sea otter, causing it to get endangered by human activity hunting, resulted in the kelp forest being affected. What was done? In 20th century, a ban on hunting of sea otter for the fur was imposed, and after that, it was expected that the sea otter should return to normal. It was not endangered anymore, but then suddenly in the 20th century, once again in 20th century, when it was not endangered anymore, the number of sea otters started to decrease again. What was happening here? This time, killer whales had started predating the sea otter, and how killer whales ended up having the going for predation for the sea otter, because these killer whales were supposed to feed on fishes, and there was less fish in water because these fishes have been were already overconsumed by humans. So because of overfishing, so there was less fish in the sea, and this was because of that the killer whales had less you can say prey to feed on, so it turned to a different prey. So it turned on to sea otter. So sea otter here in 19th century, again one human activity caused it to suffer. In 20th century, another human activity is causing its population to suffer. So This is how the human activity actually affect not only one species but an entire community. Another case study of African bush elephant. African bush elephant is Loxodonta africana. Loxodonta africana, it belongs to the genus Loxodonta, and africana is the species it belongs to. This is one of the biggest elephants. So it lives in savanna. Savanna have low-lying grasses. It does not have any tall trees because the sufficient sunlight is available for the low-lying grasses, since the tall trees are not blocking it. So you have a lot of low-lying grasses, a wide variety of these growing in this savanna region. So what happened? This Loxodonta africana was hunted for its tusks. Its habitat destruction occurred. Its habitat fragmentation was followed because more land was reclaimed for farming and for construction or mining or other human activities. So and these Loxodonta africana was hunted for its tusks, the product that we make from ivory. So these resulted in the elephant number being decreased. Now, as this elephant number started to decrease, the tall plants started to grow, and the habitat of the savanna changed. When this savanna habitat started to change, not Havana, the habitat of savanna started to change. Loss of diverse life forms started to occur. Low-lying plants were unable to compete with the tall plants, so the tall plants started growing. Less sunlight was available for the low-lying grasses. There was a loss of diverse form of fungi and dung beetle. Now, what's fungi and the dung beetle? Because of this Loxodonta africana, when it was living in savanna, because of its heavy body mass, it was very destructive of plants. It would not allow the plants to grow tall. It would just eat all those away. It would just crush those under its own body weight. And the dung that it used to pass was rich in nutrients, and that dung itself was a habitat for fungi and the dung beetles to grow very well in it. So once this Loxodonta africana, this African bush elephant, was removed from that habitat, or its number reduced, it became endangered. The entire savanna, this entire region, turned into a different kind of habitat where the life forms change, and the the natural life form, the native life forms started to suffer. So we have discussed an example of sea otter and an African bush elephant. What are these? These both are keystone species. Sea otter was a keystone species in the kelp forest, and African bush elephant was a keystone species in the savanna. What's a keystone species? A keystone species play a central role in the ecosystem, most important of all species in keeping the habitat in their natural state. For example, the African bush elephant ensured that the savanna stayed a savanna and tall trees did not grow. The sea otter ensured that it was consuming the sea urchins at such a rate that the kelp forest types would not collapse. So they prevent the overexploitation of the natural resources. So what happened? All diverse life forms of organisms, they depend directly or indirectly on this keystone species in that ecosystem. Some ecosystems have one keystone species, some have more than one keystone species. If the keystone species goes endangered because of human activities, several species go endangered. But if the human activities end up affecting the keystone species and it goes endangered, then the ecosystem suffer irreparable losses. And these irreparable losses, they just reverberate throughout the ecosystem, and all the species who directly depend on this species which have gone endangered because of human some activities, they will suffer, and all the organisms directly or indirectly depending on that would be affected. So loss of such a single species has like it over the time, it has had devastating effects on the rest of its community. So that's the basic concept of a keystone species. Then pollution. Human activities have caused a lot of pollution to accumulate. We discussed PCB. PCB are polychlorinated biphenyls. They are used in manufacturing process, and they cause a reduced immunity because these PCBs, they go in water. They cause DNA damage in birds and mammals, as well as in fishermen who go in water and their sperms is found to be damaged because this PCB, it caused DNA damage. So this caused reduced immunity and reduced fertility in mammals who are going to in water where PCB is present. And non-biodegradable plastic is another example of how humans use non-biodegradable plastic. These are actually eaten by, they are present in the fishing nets and the bags that we just throw off, we dispose of. Fishes and turtles, they get caught in these discarded nets. This is a very, very you can say helpless situation for them. And turtles, they eat this plastic mistaking it for jellyfishes, and then they just suffocate, they die. Fertilizer runoff. We use excess of fertilizer to increase the crop yield, and this leads to increased algal growth because of eutrophication. It causes increased algae this prevents sunlight from reaching to the aquatic plants, and then they start to suffer and the aquatic life starts to die. Acid rain oxides of sulfur and nitrogen, which comes from burning of the fossil fuel. It's from the combustion of fossil fuel. The more we use these, the more we release these in the atmosphere, and then they come down with the rainfall. And the pH of rivers and the lakes, it just drops down. It becomes more acidic. So life forms living in river, living in pond, they start to suffer. Greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, which are released from the burning of fossil fuel, they trap ultraviolet light, and this causes global warming. Polar ice caps have started to melt, and it causes flooding. Flooding is a concern because the high tides cause destruction of habitats on the coastlines, as well as it causes the overgrowth of phytoplanktons due to excess nutrients being delivered there. Thank you so much. That's it from my side for now.